I just wanted to start this episode with a message of thanks. Thank you to everyone that chooses to listen to this podcast. By doing this, you're enabling me to reach more people so that they might learn how to unchain the pain to live a healthier, happier life. The feedback that I get from those that take action and are inspired by the show's content is incredibly rewarding. So I'd like to ask you a teeny tiny favour. You are truly able to change the course of this podcast, the types of guests I have on this show, and everything that I do by doing one simple thing. And that is simply hitting the subscribing button. The guests on this podcast are incredible because so many of you have hit that button. When I think of what I want to do this year on this show, this is fueled by the amount of you that subscribe, that tune in, and that comment on the show's content. So please keep subscribing, keep commenting. Any type of comment, please keep them coming, and keep sharing the shows that you find inspiring. I can't wait to see what this year brings for this show, for you, for my community, and for this platform. Thank you.
What happened? Let me wind back to 2010 when the first, I was with Professor David Smith, and we were just waiting to break the code to see how the B vitamins would work compared to placebo, and just got the result. And I said, what now? And he said, well, I hope within 5 years it will be standard policy on the National Health Service here in the UK. And I said, what would it be? And he said, well, you have to measure cognitive function 40 years, 30 to 40 years. Everyone over 50 has to have cognitive function test. And if not good, then measure the homocysteine. And if raised, give the B vitamins. The omegas came a bit later. Mm-hmm. And, I was skeptical because I've worked in this field so long, and I've seen, I'm a man who got hung, drawn, and quartered for saying sugar is driving diabetes, for saying don't drink loads of milk if you've got breast cancer, for saying HRT is a risk factor for breast cancer, for saying that fats are actually essential, for saying that it's carbs that are driving weight, not fat. I mean, I've been hung, drawn, and quartered so many times.
But you're back together, and we love you, Patrick, because all of what you've said is true.
Well, I'm like a flatworm, the head just goes back. But the point is that I was skeptical. So what we did at the charity was we got permission to digitize the cognitive function test that's used in memory clinics.
Yeah.
We then ran a study to make sure that the digital version was just the same, which it is. In fact, it's slightly better. And then we made it freely available a few years ago to anyone. And we've tested 380,000 people. I mean, today we've tested over 100 people. Mm-hmm. And we want to get to 1 million people. So the point is you do the test and you can find out how you score. And if you don't score well, there's also a questionnaire, which is called the Dementia Risk Index questionnaire. And it works out across 8 domains what your risk is. And then we've literally launched this month an app or a program that then takes your weakest link. I mean, you can actually choose which one you want to work on, and shows you exactly how to reduce your risk step by step. But the important point is we did research here in the UK with University College London and the NHS to sort of understand why people don't take the test if they know about it. And the answer is, I don't want to take the test. I'm scared. I'm worried. I don't want to know. I'd rather bury my head in the sand. I don't want to know. Why don't you want to know? Because there's nothing you can do about it. Why is there nothing you can do about it? Because it's in the genes. So one of the most important missions of this project, I would like in a year's time, if I walk down the high street and stop someone and say, what percentage of Alzheimer's do you think is in the genes? Most people will say 30 to 50%. I want people to say less than 1%.
Less than 1%. The message is out there. Less than 1% is in your genes in the context of getting Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah.
99% of it is within your control.
Absolutely. And so what we did, I mean, there's so many, I mean, even your dental health, your gut health, your exercise, your social interaction, your cognitive stimulation, your B vitamins, obviously your omegas, your antioxidants, vitamin C, whether you've had high blood pressure or diabetes or heart disease, whether you had a head injury, your level of education when you're young, your sleeping, your stress. I mean, there are so many risk factors, and we realized that you can organize them really into 8 domains. One domain is the B vitamins and the homocysteine we've spoken about. The second is brain fats. And it's not just the omegas, omega-3 and fish and so on, and the phospholipids, which is eggs, but also vitamin D is a very important brain fat. And we may talk a little bit about ketones and how the brain actually likes to make ketones as a fuel from fat. So there's brain fats. Number 3 is whenever you're generating energy, you make oxidants. So antioxidants and polyphenols is the next thing. And it's also to do with fruit and veg. So we know people who eat a more Mediterranean style diet, more fruit and veg, less risk. Number 4 is blood sugar. We actually call it low carb and glycemic load. So it's not only eating less carbs, but eating the right kind of carbs. So that's sort of number 4. Then we have number 5 is healthy gut. And number 6 is active body. So you're actually doing exercise. This is terribly, terribly important. And then we have active mind. So using your mind, and then sleep and calm, or it's really sleep and stress. So we could get all of those risk factors into those 8 areas. And when you do the online cognitive function test, which is not a questionnaire, it's interactive. I can't tell you how it works, but you'll be shown things, whatever. You then fill in the questionnaire. The questionnaire then works out your risk. This is sort of an example. Yeah, I know people on audio won't see this, but basically what we're looking at is 8 cogs, and some are red and some are yellow and some are green and some are orange. And that's giving you a score for each of those areas. And then the app that we've just launched, Cognition, helps you to work out what to do. So what we're doing now really is putting prevention into action, creating an army of citizen health scientists. We want to get 1 million people involved. And of course, what happens is there's a sort of caution, warning. There are side effects because it's all of these things, your blood sugar, your B vitamins, your omegas, as I know you've spoken about so many times before, and the antioxidants, active body, active mind, sleep, calm and so on. That's what's driving all disease. So
it drives everything. All of those risk factors are associated with every chronic disease.
So this is a sort of sneaky strategy to actually not just make sure you never get Alzheimer's, which is a preventable disease, but eliminate or vastly reduce your risk for all those other diseases that you really don't need to get.
What we need to do more of that's within our control to help balance our gut microbiome.
So there's probably 2 things, isn't there? There's the food that you're eating, and then there's your, again, the sort of stress levels. So I think, often people focus a lot on the food that they're eating, and not so much on their emotional state. So I'll often see people working so hard on the clean diet and eating really well, but also eating when they're very stressed and eating so quickly and, gobbling it all up really, so you do need to do the 2 together. So it's obviously with the gut, it's got so many neurons in, hasn't it? Obviously this direct impact with the brain. So in terms of brain health, it's, we call it the second brain, don't we? So
we do,
it's important for that. But in terms of hormones, it's, it's got lots of different, key kind of actions really. So as well as all those beneficial bacteria, they helping with absorbing nutrients and vitamins and minerals from your food. They're obviously important for the inflammation response and your immune response. And inflammation in the body can trigger cortisol, again having an effect on all the hormones through that pathway. and also estrogen. So it has a massive impact. So there's something called the estrobolome, which is like the bacteria in the gut that affect the estrogen metabolism.
Okay.
So, and that's quite a really key, what's the word? It's kind of the focus of when you're looking at sort of hormone health and you're looking at the gut, you'll often be looking at, okay, for example, do you have bacteria which raise beta-glucuronidase, which is one of the pathways which influences estrogen metabolism. So you'll be looking at the type of gut bacteria in there. So some of the beneficial bacteria can help to protect, and some of the more pathogenic bacteria might stop you from excreting estrogen. They might cause you to actually reabsorb more estrogen. So they can have a huge impact on your estrogen levels. So that's a massive part of thing that we look at the clinic. You know, if we've seen people with endometriosis, for example, you'll often do a really deep dive into that. You can often see that there are problems with the gut flora. So you're looking for markers that relate to inflammation often, or you might be looking for signs of sort of leaky gut, which is obviously where the lining of the gut becomes more permeable, and in that instance you start to reabsorb proteins and sort of toxic compounds that can trigger off inflammation in the body or autoimmune conditions as well. So, I mean, I also work a lot with women with thyroid problems, and you might see that kind of going on behind the scenes in some autoimmune conditions. And even there's theories that endometriosis is linked to that as well. So like the lining of the gut and the gut barrier, you know, we can look for markers of that on stool tests, and we can influence that a lot with the food that you're eating and the, you know, what you're doing with your diet and supplements, for example. So you're looking at the bacteria in the gut, you're looking at the lining of the gut. Is there sort of food sensitivities? Another thing that often happens in the gut, if you've got gut dysbiosis problems, is you might start to produce bacteria which can increase histamine in the body. And we know that estrogen also stimulates histamine receptors. So another thing that sometimes happens in the perimenopause, when estrogen being high, if there's a gut problem too, you'll see often high histamine. So people start to develop allergies. Sometimes you'll see more allergy symptoms like food sensitivity, skin rashes, urticaria, rhinitis. All those kind of allergy symptoms can get worse with the hormone changes. And they might be cyclical. So they might be like within the menstrual cycle, you see, well, actually allergies are worse at a particular point when the estrogen's high, basically. You might see just overall allergies increasing. So that's often that's related to gut health as well.
See, I don't want people to buy food in plastic packages or tins at all. I want people to eat real food, like, you know, an apple or a fish that doesn't come with a label on it. But if you are still getting stuff in a package, then take your magnifying glass and read the ingredients, whether it's something you're going to put in yourself, that's food or drink, or something that you're going to put on yourself. Now, there are alternatives. You know, there are safe moisturizers, lip salves, deodorants, shampoos, all these things from a good health food shop. Like I say, not a high street chain that only sells its own brand. You can get alternatives for virtually all of these.
And I would say, I would encourage people to go to Jenny's book, because she's got loads of guidance on that. But also you can go to the Think Dirty app, which is very much a US app, so it doesn't have everything from a UK perspective. But if you're based in the States, you can download the Think Dirty app or the EWG app, Environmental Working Group app, that will provide you a rating from the Think Dirty app out of 10 as to how toxic the product is, and then it will offer less toxic alternatives.
Yeah, that's right. And what you have to be aware of is a bit of a minefield, because there are certain companies that on the whole are very, very good, like Sukin, like Green People, like Urtekram, which is a Danish one. But occasionally these companies get bought out by a big pharmaceutical company, and then products that you were buying last year that were really clean and safe have now got, say, titanium dioxide added to the sun cream, something like that. I did a whole series of Instagram posts a few months ago about sunscreen. and how careful you have to be. But you
Yeah, I have actually noticed that myself with my daughter when we used to buy a product called Aveeno, and it was for the bath, and it was considered quite safe in the context of the app. You know, looking at the ratings of the app, I didn't know as much detail as I do now, but they clearly changed the ingredients and started having a detrimental effect. Not just the girls in my NCT group noticed that those that were using the product noticed that there were problems with skin, dryness and so on.
That's
So
right.
switched it.
And so you have to read the ingredients list every time because it may change. But you'll get to know, you'll get to know what these things are. You can look them up. It's not very difficult. And, being careful what you put in yourself and on yourself just becomes a habit in the same way that cleaning your teeth is a habit and no longer feels burdensome.
So could you just explain, we talk about everything that you put on our skin, what impact it has? And I think it's really important for women as well, isn't it, in the context of our endocrinology, is the impact it has on us, what we might notice when we're using products that are toxic.
The problem with all this, Ruth, is that the people who get immediate effects, the chemically sensitive people who say, oh, I can't use that, it makes me feel dreadful. Although on the surface they're suffering more, they're the lucky ones because their body gives them clear signals to keep away from that stuff. It's poisonous. Most of us don't get those clear signals, and therefore we're more at risk. So it's not something most people notice immediately. Yeah. But what we have to notice collectively at the population level is that we're now being told in the Western world 1 in 2 of us will get cancer, 1 in 3 heart disease, and there are something like 3 million people with diabetes, nearly 1 million with Alzheimer's in the UK, and we have to stop normalizing this. This is not normal. This is not how it was before the Industrial Revolution. So the effect we're seeing is general and cumulative. I ask a room full of 50 people, do you know anyone with cancer? And every single hand goes up. Now, if you'd asked that question 100 years ago, maybe 3 or 4 hands, if that. So these are the real pandemics. This is what we're seeing. And this has been indisputably linked with the chemicals that we are putting in ourselves and on ourselves. Right? So, and it's because we're dealing with a cocktail. You can't do a straight line and say this particular chemical causes this particular disease. I mean, you can occasionally, but mostly we're talking about a cocktail effect. Yeah. So, there's synthetic toxic chemicals in your makeup or in your laundry powder. When you can get Ecover laundry powder, which is completely safe. You can get safe stuff from Ecover for the dishwasher. You can use Ecover washing up liquid, and you can use about 1/4 of the amount that you think you need. You can make all these changes. And if everyone does that, we will see the rates of chronic disease go down. But everyone is exposed to a cocktail. So there's all those personal things. There's the insecticides and the fungicides and so on in your food if you're not eating organic. And remember, organic isn't some weird special kind of food. Organic is what our great-great-grandparents ate and what everyone before them for 1 million generations ate. It's simply food that hasn't been sprayed with pesticides, or an animal that hasn't been dosed on antibiotics because it's living in such cruel conditions. Its immune system gets stressed and therefore it gets infections and so on in a cascade. And animals that haven't been fed on artificial hormones.
Explain the facts behind what is causing us to experience the changes in our health states that we didn't have 50, 100 years ago. Just
I think that's really important because, yes, I'm going to be talking about how crucial nutrition is and how dangerous toxins are and how we can use nutrition and other methods to get rid of the toxins, how we can know where they are in our environment, how we can avoid them. But actually we need to, and that's what ecological medicine does. The nutritional medicine half of it is putting the good stuff back in. The environmental half of it is identifying and taking the bad stuff out. But we also need to know why we're nutritionally depleted in the first place and why we've got toxins on board. But prior to all that, rewinding in a sense, before all that, why is this an issue at all? Why do we need to know about it? And this is epidemiological. This is about the changes in the public's health, the population's health, as you were implying, over the past 50 years, but actually over the past 200 years, really, going back to the Industrial Revolution, we have been deprived of sunshine, fresh air, exercise. We've been fed on junk food and exposed to numerous synthetic chemicals, about 100,000 at the latest count, with which our bodies are not evolved to cope, right? Our detox systems don't know what to do with all this stuff. They were evolved for things like stinging nettles and our own estrogen. And so we're all genetically different. Some people cope much better than others with the industrial toxins that surround us in our lives. But the point is, we need to face up to the fact that we are iller than we were as a population, and we are iller than we need to be. And so the purpose of identifying the causes is to reverse the trend in illness that conventional medicine both admits and denies in the same breath. All right. So when pressed, epidemiologists and other doctors will say, yes, cancer is at the highest rate ever. Yes, it's going up fastest among young people. There are 3 million with diabetes in the UK, 1 million with dementia, that's just the ones that are diagnosed. Vast numbers of people with heart attacks, cancer, autoimmune disease, and neurodegenerative conditions, Parkinson's, MS, Alzheimer's, and so on. But they will tell us that the reason is that we've got an aging population. And it's not true. And it's so important that we know it's not true, so we can look for the real causes. Firstly, we're not aging faster than people did in the middle of the 19th century. We're just aging sicker. We have this ghastly, prolonged twilight of disability and suffering in the last decade of our life, which isn't necessary and was not part of human history before the Industrial Revolution. Okay, so people, if you read Dickens, you will know people lived into their 80s and 90s just like we do now, but they kept their marbles and they kept their physical energy. This idea that we are living much longer than our ancestors is based on a simple arithmetical mistake, which is we are told that we live into our 80s and 90s, but in the mid-19th century, the average age of death was 45. Well, the average age of death was, but that's because a quarter of the population died before they reached the age of 5, because of the infectious diseases that ravaged everybody's childhood, diseases which are only serious in the conditions in which people lived. So very, very overcrowded, terrible nutrition, smoke, no fresh air, you know, it's like Dickens' industrial London, and Manchester was an absolute hellhole. And so a quarter of kids died before they reached the age of 5. And if you take those kids out of the population, which changed, by the way, with improved living conditions and more space and more air and so on, when you take those kids out of the equation, they lived precisely as long as we do. So it's not about aging, it's about what we are doing to ourselves. And that's where we need to look at nutrition and environmental factors, because our genes change only extremely slowly over millennia, but the environment has changed over a couple of hundred years, which is a tiny blip. It's a millisecond in the time scale of biological evolution. So we're living in an environment that isn't fit for us. And we need to learn how to change the environment and how to protect our bodies, both of those, because you can't separate what we're doing to the planet from what we're doing to our own bodies. You know, we breathe the air, we drink the water, we eat the food that's grown in the soil. So what's missing from the soil is missing from our plate, and whatever we spray on the soil gets into the water and the air, gets into us. What goes around comes around.
We are living now in a food desert, but we have more food than we can possibly eat, but it's nutritionally barren.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely, and you know, with the B vitamins too, that one is for, you know, neurologically.
Yeah. Those
are for your abnormal or that, especially like B9, it's really essential for the production of the serotonin, which is your neurotransmitters, which control impulse behavior and then also improve mental focus. So, and then we have the lack of B12 and B6, which then leads to hyperactivity.
Yeah. And I've noticed that you know, B12 also, I've had clients who've had really low levels of B12 that's caused them heart palpitations.
Yes.
And it has not been picked up by clinicians here in the UK. They don't bother to measure B12 levels, and it can hugely impact someone's heart health.
Yes, absolutely. And you know what, too? Magnesium is like one of the deficiencies that the brain like picks up on magnesium always. You know, it's one of the biggest, it's really good for calming under stress.
Yeah, and I think it's so important, you know, it's great for heart health as well. And it's often, isn't it, the one that's used as the last resort, even though potentially it should be used as the first.
I know, isn't that amazing? It's so amazing. So like, it's so easy to fix.
Exactly. So I'd love to dive into like the different brain types, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, sure.
You know, particularly going back to your nephew's story. If you wouldn't mind unpicking it for all of those parents out there that are listening and thinking, oh, my child is hyperactive, they can't sit still, they're not focused, how can I help them?
Right. So let's remember that the brains of children are developed from your cerebellum all the way to your prefrontal. So when you have children in middle school or even kindergarten through 5, their brains are definitely not developed. So their prefrontal is still a little low. So let's talk about the prefrontal. So your prefrontal is like the executive function.
Yeah. So
yes.
Should we just bring up a little brain image here for people? I'm just going to hold one because my brain's going to fall apart. But the prefrontal bit is here that you can see. For those that don't know, it's the very front part of your brain just behind your forehead.
Yes. Yep. And so really your treatments or your behavioral treatments for that is kids really need to have structured goal setting. Like give them goals and let's boost that dopamine as well. So higher protein, lower glycemic food. Green tea is really great. And then you have your supplements, right? So you have our multivitamin at Brain MD, which is called the NerveVite Plus, our omega-3s, and our probiotic are those that are super, super important. And then also getting zinc or foods that have zinc in them. So you have like mushrooms and oysters and clams, like your shellfish are really important for zinc.
And does it make a difference? So my daughter Lily, I'll just pick my daughter because it's easy. She doesn't like cooked mushrooms, but she'll eat raw mushrooms. Is there any changes in the zinc uptake? Do you know in mushrooms, whether they're cooked or not cooked?
So there could be. So if she doesn't like them cooked, what you should do is keep the fin side up and put them on a ledge where the sun can hit them.
Okay.
And the sun will actually absorb the vitamin D, which is so amazing. So I'm a total science nerd, just as a little side note. So I always love like learning all the kinds of new things. So yeah, so when you put mushrooms with their gill side up, where all the where the sun can hit them, you'll get the extra vitamin D, which is amazing.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's exciting.
Yes. Also, so lower carbs for those kids with the low prefrontal. That can't sit still. Not a lot, just.
So more protein, more complex carbs with lots and lots of fiber.
Yes.
And low simple carbs, less chips.
Yes.
Less crisps.
Less mac and cheese.
less burgers and cheese and.
Well, if you do mac and cheese, so with my nephew, so we did mac and cheese, but what I did is I put the vegetables in the mac and cheese. So make sure you're doing fresh vegetables in the mac and cheese.
Okay.
And we can still do pizza, but you have to add a salad. So
yeah,
the reward is the pizza and eat the salad first, kind of thing.
Okay, yeah.